Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. Scholomance Academy is coming soon and there's a lot of decks to be built for the new expansion. I've actually found this expansion to be the most difficult expansion ever to build decks for. Not because the decks would be particularly difficult or that there wouldn't be many things to do, but simply because of the dual class cards, which means that every class has access to more powerful class cards than ever before, so there are so many. There is support for so many archetypes, and it's quite obvious that not all of those archetypes will succeed. So trying to build the decks to be able to compare them in order to figure out, okay, does this deck actually look stronger than this other deck? It's just so much work. Anyway, I have managed to complete the Druid class. So I have built 6 ideas on what Druid could look like in Scholomance Academy, and I think 2 of these will actually turn into meta decks at some interval. The other 4 seem a little bit weaker now that I can actually compare the lists when I have built some, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, as the first one, this is a deck very close to many of the decks that were already played by various early access streamers in the early access event, Survival of the Fittest Druid. So the Fittest Druid obviously is going to be played with Kael'thas Sunstrider, going to be played with Guardian Animals. The synergies between these cards are just so incredibly strong. You want some ramp in the deck, so you will ramp up. You need to put in a beast package, 5 or 6 beasts into the deck that are going to be drawn by the Guardian Animals. You need Kael'thas Sunstrider, you need a bunch of cheap spells. Then you have Survival of the Fittest, so you also have some expensive spells, which means that you probably want to run stuff like an Abyssal Defender. You may want to run stuff like Ysera Unleashed, and in order to survive you may need some removal, so you may need to run stuff like Speaker Ghidra. The deck almost builds itself. But of course playtesting will eventually show which way this deck is going to take. But if you can get to a Kael'thas Sunstrider turn, you can get a big swing with Guardian Animals with Survival of the Fittest, boom. You should just win the game with that. Of course you don't always find Kael'thas, then you might have difficulties getting that Survival of the Fittest. If you don't find Guardian Animals and you draw your beasts, there are ways that this deck can just crumble. But that's the way Spell Druid and all the other Druid decks currently work as well, so the deck can still be very, very scary. However, I think there will be another path for Druid as well, and that path will center around this small, cute 1-drop, the Gibberling. 1 mana 1/1 with Spell Burst, summon a Gibberling. So you play Gibberling, then you play a spell, and that will deplete the Spell Burst of the original Gibberling, and it will summon a new Gibberling that has Spell Burst. Then when you play another spell, it will deplete the Spell Burst of the new Gibberling, and it will summon another Gibberling that has an active Spell Burst. So in best case scenario, Gibberling Druid, it's going to do Gibberling, Lightning Bloom, Nature Studies, and Royal Infestation. It's just going to fill the board with Gibberlings on turn 1, and maybe even buff them all up. And that's gonna be pretty tough. What else is the deck going to do? Well, because Gibberlings are activated by Spell Burst, you probably want a lot of spells. You could have exotic Mount Sellers in a deck like this. I did consider that. I'm not sure, maybe it's going to be an exotic Mount Seller deck, that's totally possible. You can run Fungal Fortunes for some card draw, you might want some ramp. There's also this path with Glowfly Swarm, Runic Carvings, Soul of the Forest, giving you these fairly sticky boards, and then moving on from there. I'm not sure, maybe the Runic Carvings should actually be an exotic Mount Seller. That would also make this deck almost a budget deck, and it can just explode real quick early in the game, so once this archetype is fine-tuned, I think this is going to be really, really scary. Maybe even more so than the Survival of the Fittest build. There is support for so many things in the new set. One of the support cards is of course Forest Warden Omu. 6 mana 5/4 with Spell Burst, refresh your mana crystals. So when you're at 10 mana, you play Forest Warden and you play Germination. And that means that the Spell Burst of the first Forest Warden is depleted, then you will have a new Forest Warden with Spell Burst active, and you have 10 mana crystals again. Then you can play Malygos, you can play a spell, you have 10 mana crystals again, and then you can just unload and boom, dead opponent. So this sort of combo deck is possible, but the problem with this combo deck is how is it going to survive long enough to pull off the combo. There are also many ways to pull off the actual combo. You can do 1 germination, you can do 2 germinations. You might germinate Malygos as well, then that would allow you to push a little bit more damage. The simple combo with 1 germination, Malygos, just Moonfire, swipe, that's exactly 30 damage. You might need some more in some cases, so there's some flexibility over there. The way I built this particular version is to take advantage of the dragon synergies, so to be able to use Breath of Dreams to ramp up faster, and then there could be Crimson Hotheads, Emerald Explorers, there can be some Taunt Dragons that help you survive a little bit longer, and Isara Unleashed as a separate wing addition from Mali, although it might also make sense to focus completely on the Malygos wing addition, so lots of development left to do on that one. However, I think this one's going to be a little bit slow, and looking at how aggressive decks are getting some sweet tools, I just don't see how this deck is going to live long enough. There's also some support for a traditional Treant archetype, with runic carvings summoning those Treant totems, but overall, without Mulch Muncher, without Dendrologist that were lost from standard format in the last standard rotation, they're only available in wild, it's still a little bit hard to see how a Treant Druid could survive. I went ahead and built a traditional looking Treant token Druid decklist anyway, with runic carvings, with nature studies, just to get a feel of what it could look like. But I think this token archetype is probably a little bit too fair. You want stuff like those Gibberlings, you want stuff like Exotic Mount Sellers, you want stuff that, like that Kael'thas, Survival of the Fittest. You want to be unfair in this game. Being fair just probably isn't going to be enough. On the subject of being fair and being unfair, even Big Druid might be too fair nowadays. I also tried to build up a Big Druid deck. What sort of Big Druid could we have in this expansion? Well, Big Druid could use Guardian Animals, and it could use Lightning Bloom, and it might even be interested in the new dragon, the Plagued Proto-Drake. 8 mana 8/8, Death Rattle, summon a random 7 cost minion. So you could build a Big Druid with strength in numbers, with Breath of Dreams, with Nature Studies, Lightning Bloom, being this sort of half beast, half dragon style deck. So you have these beasts coming from your guardian animals, then you have dragons that you can hopefully get from strength in numbers, and you have some big beasts and dragons that you can also ramp into. But is this going to be able to answer Survival of the Fittest is a big question. And no matter how big this is, and this is pretty big with the Proto-Drakes and Scrapyard Colossus, but it just might not be big enough. Finally, one of my favorite Druid archetypes of all time is Quest Druid, and Quest Druid is getting some interesting new tools, because there's Speak a Ghidra, giving some removal, there's Nature Studies, and Nature Studies is really, it's just amazing card. Because it discovers a spell and your next spell costs 1 less. So you can hold on to that discount. You can hold on to that discount for the next turn even. That means that in some decks you can still play like Fungal Fortunes for 2 mana. If you play Nature Studies on 1, you can play Fungal Fortunes on 2. Or you can play Overgrowth for 3. There's just so many things. And in Quest Druid decks you can play Hidden Oasis, Nourish on 5. For example, if you complete your quest on that turn, you can get those into play immediately. Really strong looking card. And then there's Groundskeeper. Belgrave, if you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, restore 5 health. Quest Druid always wants to have some of these expensive spells, because Nourish, Hidden Oasis, Starfall, there's a bunch of good big spells in the archetype. So Quest Druid is getting these new tools, but none of these really help Quest Druid do anything broken. These are just solid, good things. But this sort of incremental improvement might be too weak in the upcoming meta. Especially when we're seeing some really interesting aggro decks coming up, and we know that Quest Druid has to float some mana in order to complete that quest, and can you really afford to do that? That can be tough. These are the decks that I think Blizzard is giving support for Druid, for Scholomance Academy, and that Survival of the Fittest deck and the Gibberling deck are the ones that I think will prove to be the best ones. But of course only time and playtesting will tell. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel for more.